David Haye, in a recent interview, said that he would only consider a comeback against the winner of Anthony Joshua versus Tyson Fury for the undisputed fight. Now, he says that after a prolonged rest, his injuries have all healed up. He's not training intensely anymore. But yes, when you do get a rest and your body heals up, you start to believe again. Because as I've mentioned many, many times, the mind of a top-level professional fighter is not like the mind of the average civilian. It's not like the mind of the average boxing fan. It's very, very different. You have to have unnatural levels. Let me not say unnatural, but you have to have unusual levels of self-belief. And that is tied into ego. So somebody like David Haye has a much bigger ego, a much higher opinion of himself than the average Joe. And the self-belief that is required to reach the top in boxing, particularly when you're somebody like David Haye, who, when he first started boxing, he wasn't the most naturally talented guy who ever stepped in the gym. He was all arms and legs. That's the way Mick Carney, who, is now passed away many, many years ago, Mick Carney, but he even said that when David Haye first came in the gym, he was all arms and legs as a young kid, and he wasn't a standout talent immediately. And David Haye, very, very early on, from when he was a young child, said that he would be heavyweight champion of the world, but he really wasn't a natural heavyweight. He had a lot of his amateur bouts as a teenager as a light heavyweight, and he started doing weights even then to try and bulk up to get up to the 91 kilogram class, which is heavyweight, and that would later become cruiserweight as a professional. In fact, when he first turned professional, the old cruiserweight limit was, God, what was it? 13 stone. Was it 13 stone 8 or something, or 9? I can't remember the old cruiserweight limit. But while David Haye was professional, I think it was before he fought Carl Thompson, that's when they changed the cruiserweight limit to 200 pounds. But yeah, even then, Haye was having to do weights to get himself up to weight. So he's always been a guy who won't allow even his own body to tell him no, much less other people. When he's determined to do something, he'll do it. And so that takes a tremendous amount of self-belief, self-confidence, ego, etc. And so David Haye's achievements in his career have been achieved through listening to himself. Ultimately, I know he's had trainers and Adam Booth has been with him and what have you, but ultimately it's been a journey of David Haye believing in himself, listening to himself, and getting to where he is right now. Being successful and former world champion, all that kind of stuff, rich man. But that level of self-belief never really leaves you. And again, after the long rest, where his body is feeling all healed up and stuff like that, those thoughts start to creep in. Maybe I could give it one more go. Maybe that Tony Bellew or those Tony Bellew fights weren't really representative of what I can still do. And to be fair, David Haye did say, I need to be careful, with allowing myself to start believing that I can be the old David Haye again, watching fights thinking I could slip this punch and throw this punch when he's watching Tyson Fury or Anthony Joshua, etc. But we all know that David Haye, for one, likes a pound note, as do most people. And therefore, of course, he would like to fight the winner of Tyson Fury versus Anthony Joshua for the money, if nothing else. I mean, now David Haye is trying to turn himself into a professional poker player. He was toying with the idea of being a professional actor, but that seems to have died down. Now he's talking about being a professional, or he has been on the road to becoming a professional poker player, which is all to do with money, right? So yeah, maybe it's just in the back of his head thinking, I could get in there, con the public, give them some spiel and talk them into believing that this time I've got it right. My body's healed. I can do it again. David Haye, the ultimate salesman, used to do that to the British public time and time again. He used to rinse the British public, and he got me. once or twice. I'm not even going to lie with his nonsense. I was a big critic of David Haye during the height of the Klitschko era because I could see that Haye was lying about wanting to fight Vladimir ASAP. He milked that WBA strap for as long as he could and avoided the Klitschko fight before eventually going for it. And he gave us John Ruiz and Audley Harrison in between. And he had that belt for something like 2 years without fighting Klitschko. He milked that belt. But yeah, I was onto him then, but outside of that, he did get me a couple times, I'm not going to lie. But yeah, David Haye thinking about maybe coming back for that fight. It would be an absolute scandal if either Anthony Joshua or Tyson Fury gave David Haye a shot at a title. And David Haye knows this because he did say it's extremely unlikely that either one of those guys would want to fight me. First of all, how would David Haye get ranked? If David Haye or if the undisputed champion was some up-and-coming fighter who just become champion and they wanted to give him a couple easy fights for his first defense or two, then maybe David Haye could get a shot. How old is he now? 40? Or he must be 40 this year, I think, David Haye. So maybe, yeah, if there was an up-and-coming heavyweight champion, they could bring David Haye out of retirement and have him fight. But right now, Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury have both participated in elite level contests. So guys on that level who have been fighting, the cream of the crop opposition, you can't then have them take on a David Haye who got smashed to bits by Tony Bellew twice the last time he was in the ring, the last couple times he was in the ring, and who hasn't fought in however long it is now. That's just not viable at all. David Haye would have to come back and beat somebody with it. This is one of the things that David Haye used to do, is when he would make his comeback, he didn't like to fight contenders. He just wanted to jump straight in with the champions. Even Derek Chisora, he wasn't planning to fight Derek Chisora. Him and Derek Chisora had that brawl, and that's how the fight manifested. It manifested out of the brawl because it was such a controversial incident that it created a public demand for the fight. And that demand equals money. David Haye eventually understood this, so that's why he went ahead and fought Derek Chisora, because he wasn't planning to fight that Derek Chisora. That wasn't somebody who was on his radar at the time. He just wanted to go straight for Vitaly Klitschko. He'd already lost to Vladimir. But David Haye understood that, particularly in the heavyweight division, it's very, very risky, especially for a guy who's not a naturally big guy like David Haye, and a guy who trains the way he does. Because again, David Haye is not naturally a heavyweight. He has to do a lot of weightlifting to add extra bulk. And when you have to do all that weightlifting, it takes its toll on your body. All the weightlifting tightens your muscles. And when your muscles are tight and then you're throwing explosive punches the way David Haye does, where you're making all these rapid movements, where you're shifting a hell of a lot of weight around very, very quickly when you're throwing your punches, that tends to cause injuries, because your muscles are tight for all the weightlifting. Then you're throwing all these big shots. Obviously, he does all his stretching and stuff like that. But irrespective of all your stretching, if you're doing all that weightlifting and you're putting on 20 pounds of muscle above what you would naturally weigh without all the weightlifting, I'm sorry, people, but that's going to make you tight. It just does. Yeah? And so you're throwing these very explosive shots like David Haye would throw, and that's how you end up getting injuries. So, David Haye always knew this. He knew his body was vulnerable. He knew his punch resistance wasn't the best. And that's why he would avoid contenders and just try and go for the champions. Like, in his mind, if he's going to take a gamble against the heavyweight, it might as well be the guy with the belts. Outside of that, just give me cream puffs. That was his philosophy, it would seem. So if he was to come back and face Anthony Joshua or Tyson Fury, he would have to do what he wouldn't do even in his younger days, and that's actually fight some viable contenders. He didn't think Tony Bellew was a viable contender. He thought fighting Bellew would be like taking candy from a baby. And I think most people did, probably including myself for the first fight anyway. I was expecting David Haye to deal with Tony Bellew, although we didn't know what Haye had after the long hiatus. He came back and fought a couple of knockover jobs, and that really didn't tell us anything. I felt like he didn't look himself in those fights. His movement was weird, and I mentioned that in the post-fight videos for the Demori fight and the Jurjai fight, that his movement looked weird to me. It didn't look like the old David Haye. And we found out exactly why his movement was so weird in that Tony Bellew fight. So anyway, just some musings on David Haye pondering a comeback. Hopefully it don't happen and he stays retired. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. I know with a lot of people, there's this feeling with David Haye that he didn't quite fulfill his potential, that he could have been better than he was. Personally, I disagree with that. I think David Haye is actually an overachiever. At heavyweight anyway. Yeah, I think he's an overachiever. I think that given his physical constraints, the fact that really and truly, if you take all the weightlifting away from David Haye and just have him do normal boxing training, he probably struggled to weigh 200 pounds. I'm serious. David Haye's not a big guy. He's naturally a very slim guy. You take away all that weightlifting and all that kind of business from David Haye, the protein shakes and what have you, 190-pound man. Yeah. And when you consider that, the fact that he went up, and 190-pound man whose punch resistance was never that great, and whose stamina, with all the muscle that he added to his body, was never that great either, because of the fact that, again, you're carrying all this extra muscle, which your body wasn't designed for, which your heart and lungs weren't designed to carry naturally. It's going to take its toll. So that's why David Haye was a low volume fighter, particularly at heavyweight, but to some degree at cruiserweight as well. Because if you up his punch volume, he's going to get too tired and he won't be able to throw the big, powerful, explosive shots. And that's another thing as well. If you're throwing like steady, medium power punches, you can do that for longer than throwing these fast, explosive bursts where you're putting everything into the punches, because that's the way David Haye used to fight. That taxes you. It taxes your energy when you fight that way. Yeah. David Haye, hopefully, as I say, doesn't come back. I think he overachieved, to be honest with you, picking up a version of the heavyweight title. At cruiserweight, that's where I think David Haye maybe underachieved. If he'd stuck around at that weight, he could have dominated. He could have given Evander Holyfield a run for his money, maybe, in terms of being up there as the greatest cruiserweight of all time. But at heavyweight, I think he did about as good as he was ever going to do, to be honest with you. Obviously, there are certain matchups that David Haye could have been involved in that he wasn't involved in. But do you really think David Haye, when we look back now retrospectively, I know hindsight is always 20/20, but if you take Tyson Fury at his best and you put him in against David Haye, do you think Tyson Fury beats David Haye? I mean, do you think that Haye beats Fury? I don't think so. Do you think we know Haye don't beat Klitschko. Do you think Haye beats Anthony Joshua? Some people might say yes. I have serious doubts about whether he would beat the Joshua who fought Klitschko, whether he would beat the Joshua who fought even Andy Ruiz. David Haye is not Andy Ruiz, doesn't fight the same way. Isn't as good on the inside, doesn't have Andy Ruiz's chin. I'm not sure David Haye could have ever beaten any version of Anthony Joshua, the heavyweight champion. Maybe when AJ was on the way up, if you'd put a prime Haye in against the very green AJ prior to becoming champion, maybe Haye could have beaten him. But the world champion AJ, no, when I look back retrospectively, I don't think David Haye could have beaten any version of the world champion AJ, my personal opinion. So, and could David Haye have beaten Deontay Wilder? People talk about the sparring sessions that he had with Wilder and how he rocked Wilder. David Haye has said himself on numerous occasions that he edited the footage to make himself look good, or his team edited the footage to make Haye look good. And they didn't show all the moments where Wilder had a lot of success. In fact, David Haye, in the past year or so, said that one day he'll release the full sparring footage of him and Deontay Wilder. And people can then finally find out who actually got the better of it. But Haye himself said that, Deontay Wilder gave just as good as he got. And then some. So, point being, if David Haye was ever going to be heavyweight champion beyond what he did, who exactly would he have beaten? Maybe Wilder. At some stage of Wilder's career, maybe David Haye could have got him. But I could see Wilder getting David Haye too, to be honest with you. No, David Haye likes to sit back and set traps and all that kind of stuff. Deontay Wilder likes to sit back as well. And they've sparred, So that might be David Haye's best bet in a theoretical universe if he could pick one of the heavyweight champions that has been around over the past 15 years. Maybe Deontay Wilder. Well, of course, there have been others like Berman Stavern and stuff like that. But in terms of the heavyweight champions who had any kind of decent reign over the past 15 years or achieved anything significant, then obviously he beat Nikolai Valoev. But outside of that, who would you have David Haye defeating? Anyway, just some musings, people. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. It's Hatman, I'm out. Join me on Patreon. I upload a minimum of 2 podcasts every single week, covering a wide variety of controversial topics, as well as live stream Q&A sessions. Take a look on screen right now at some of the podcasts I've produced so far. For just $3 a month, the equivalent of about £2 a month, you get access to all my new podcasts and my entire back catalogue of past podcasts, including my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. You can listen on your computer or on your smartphone or tablet by downloading the Patreon app from the Google Play Store or the App Store for free. The Patreon app also allows you to download each podcast in MP3. For less than the price of a cup of coffee, you get access to dozens of hours of exclusive content. It's easy to sign up, there's no contract, and you can cancel at any time. So come and join our community of free and critical thinkers by signing up with me here on Patreon today.